Hey guys. So one of the YouTubers I should say that I subscribe to, that I've actually done a Q. I actually asked a question one time too, and he answered, and he at times has been responsive to me. Is Chris Bores, otherwise known as the Irate Gamer, or for some of you that are in the paranormal, the Ghost Doctor. But mostly for a lot of us here on YouTube, it is the Irate Gamer. And one of the things he does outside of reviewing video games and doing history of video games and all that is he does a little segment here and there called I Rate the 80s, or on occasions he does things like I Rate the 80s, aka I Rate the 70s, or I Rate the 80s, aka I Rate the 90s, or so on. And one of the I Rate the 80s I guess you could say clips that he did or features that he did was based on Nintendo cereal system. And it's not the first time he's talked about the Nintendo cereal system. He actually talked about other cereals as well, like the Ninja Turtles, and then most recently, Batman, the 1989 Batman, that is. But what do these all have in common, you might ask? Well, if you look at the symbol right here, that's what they have in common. Ralston Foods, or Ralston Cereals, which is owned, as far as I know, till this even currently to this day, by the people behind Purina Dog Chow. Yeah, the Purina Food Company that that they're called. I guess outside of being known for the dog food or cat food and all that. But Ralston is one of the divisions, the cereal food division, if you will, and it's still going strong today. You know of basically cereals like, let's say, Chex and Cookie Crisp. Well, they might get, distributed under different people, like General Mills maybe, but the people that's truly behind them is Ralston Foods. And Ralston still has a lot of properties, not properties, but a lot of cereals they're still doing today. As a matter of fact, when you look over here at this image, this is just, I think, the more recent image that I know about, or I was able to find, that shows some of the cereals that are still out there to this day. They even do some of the, oatmeal and cream of wheat alternatives outside of Quaker Oats and stuff. But one of the things that they were primarily known for back in the 1980s up until about the early to mid 2000s, and even a little before the 80s, but mostly notable in the 80s, the 90s, and like I said, up to the beginning early stages of the 2000s, maybe even mid 2000s, is the licensing of franchises for cereals. That's right. Throughout those 20 plus years, if you were a license, if you were a very well known license, like let's say the Ninja Turtles, like let's say Batman, or whatever, there was no doubt that Ralston would be one of the first companies out there to try to obtain the rights to basically distribute a cereal in your image. And more than not, they would end up doing so. Now there are other companies, of course, like Kellogg's, General Mills, Quaker, Post, you name it, that basically also gain licenses to very established franchise names to be made into cereals as well. I mean, Quaker got Mr. T and a few others, and Kellogg's got a few here and there, so did General Mills. But the one, like I said, that mostly stood out and really was a bestseller when it came to the basically trademarking and gaining the license to distribute cereals, create cereals in that image of the franchise that they were basically being licensed to do it for, was Ralston. But what cereals did they make? Well, let me show you. Okay, so there's a lot more that I downloaded here, but this is just an example of what made Ralston back in the 80s and even the 90s and up to the 2000s pretty much the king, if not king and queen, if you will, of licensed cereals. I mean, look what you have here. When you look over here, right here, I should say, on my right or your left, depending on how you're watching this on the screen, on your left, you'll see that they had a license to distribute and create a Spider-Man cereal, in the 90s, an Adams Family movie-based cereal in the 90s, a Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures cartoon serial in the 90s, Prince of Thieves, if you will. They also, back in the 80s, were given the license to do a Rainbow Bright. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, a WWF Superstars serial, which had, 2 or 3 covers. This is the one with Hogan. The other one you see on the bottom right there had the Warrior. They also were given the license to do a serial based on the Jetsons to tie in with the Jetsons animated film. Of course, everybody knows about the Ninja Turtles serial. And then when you look on my right, your on my left, your right on the screen, of course, like Chris Bors talked about in his I Rate the 80s series, you had the Nintendo Serial System, which was actually 2 serials in one box. And the reason, even Chris acknowledged that it could get a little expensive is because both of those were basically, from what he showed, were basically 2 almost like Ziploc like bags. You know, arm lengths like Ziploc like bags that had cereal in them, and half the cereal from each bag would go into the bowl. So, my honest suggestion, and I think people did figure this out when they were eating it at that time, but my honest suggestion is if they were to bring something like that out today, basically take a little bit of each and just go doot 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 doot, and that's it. And you should be good. Kind of like with the small boxes now, the small cereal variety packs they have, where you have the little cereals like this. Mix them up, you should be good. Now, of course, above that you had the Batman and Batman Returns, both distributed by Ralston. And then next to it you had the Ghostbusters cereal. They also did the Real Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 and Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters. Below it, believe it or not, you had a New Kids on the Block cereal. Below the Nintendo cereal system, you had a Gremlins cereal. And then next to that, you had basically a cereal I believe I ate as a kid because, hey, I grew up on G.I. Joe. Why wouldn't my parents get me this cereal once in a while? The G.I. Joe cereal, which had different variety of covers. Here you have Shipwreck on here. Other times you would have Cobra Commander, you would have Flint, you would have Roadblock, you would have Gung Ho. I think you had Lady J, and you had Scarlet and Duke. So you had different characters on different covers for the cereal for G.I. Joe. And then below me, that's a thumbnail from a video someone did called the top 5 Ralston cereals out there. And as you could see, like I said, it has the other cover for WWE Superstars with the Warrior. Next to the Warrior, they had a Barbie cereal. And then next to the Superstars one, you had Morning Fuddings. I'll bring that up in a little bit, one of the other pictures. Then you had Urkelos, which Chris Bors did a review on as a follow-up to the Nintendo cereal system. And then you believe it or not, Wonder Bread, in association or in collaboration with Ralston, got a cereal as well, the Wonder cereal. So these are just, some of the cereals that came out. Now, these are the other cereals they also did throughout the licensing run. As you can see on the left of me or the right of your screen, if you will, they actually licensed, I should say, to create a Cracker Jack cereal, which basically gave you a prize in the cereal itself, just like you would get a prize in the Cracker Jack boxes as well. And then on the right, your left on the screen, they had other cereals that they licensed as well. As I try to move this just a little bit, there we go. They had other cereals as well. As my hand just hit the headset there. Make sure everything's good. But they also had other cereals that they licensed out well. Like I said, you could see on my right, your left, if you will, they had Donkey Kong, believe it or not. So that's actually, when you look at the cover there, that's actually the first time Mario was in a cereal outside of the Nintendo cereal system, and later on with like the Super Mario cereals that they would make in collaboration to promote, the games like Super Mario Galaxy and such, which by the way were interactive cereal boxes because they served as somewhat as amiibo-like add-ons or accessories, if you will. Then, of course, you also look on the left, and they did a Nerds cereal and a Hot Wheels cereal as well. Basically, long story short, if you were a licensed property, if you will, a very popular one, back in that time frame, even up to the mid 2000s, if Ralston approached you with an idea, with a deal, with some kind of contractual agreement to say, hey, we want to make your franchise into a cereal, most of the time they would get it. Like I mentioned earlier, they also had other cereal companies like General Mills, Kellogg's, Post, if you will, Quaker, that would also license out established franchise IPs to create cereals of as well. But Ralston was always like the first and foremost to get to get that license. So instead of seeing someone like today, like like let's say Kellogg's or Post or Quaker or General Mills doing a lot of the licensed stuff now, back then in the 80s, the 90s, and early to mid 2000s, it was always Ralston. Now, like I said earlier, Ralston's still around. They're still doing cereals to this day and everything. But the unfortunate thing is they're not doing licensed cereals because I think financially they can't afford it. They can't afford it like, let's say, Kellogg's or General Mills or Quaker or Post can. But maybe someday down the line they will. Maybe someday down the line someone will take over and provide them with the finances to say, hey, we used to be the top in the cereal business when it came to licensed cereals based on established IPs. Let's go there again. And here's the money. That day may come. That day may come, but we'll have to see. But again, the thing is with licensed cereals, it's not uncommon for to see a company go out and say, hey, we want to license out your IP to sell as a cereal to promote your brand, to promote, let's say, your Saturday morning cartoon or your very popular franchise, or as the morning funnies were, basically the Sunday morning paper. And the one thing about the morning funnies, which is right next to the Donkey Kong one here, up here if you will, and Black Nerd Comedy, Andre Meadows, got to give him a shout out because he actually did a video on these cereals on licensed cereals as well. He mentioned that the Morning Funny cereal won a reward. They won a reward basically for their interactiveness of allowing people, when they opened up the box, as you see in that picture, they could see a whole page of comics. You see, it wasn't like a regular cereal box. No, it was bigger and probably cost a little bit more because you can open it up like a book, excuse me, like a comic book, and read some additional comics along with having the cereal based around them. But unfortunately, they also got criticism for having too much sugar and all that, too much sugar intake for kids and everything. But outside of some of the negatives that came with it, these cereals sold very well because of the fact that they were based on IPs fans were accustomed to, and basically Ralston, basically Ralston did did the best job. Anytime you would watch a television commercial on Saturday mornings, weekday afternoons, during the fall preview specials, they basically busted their butts to promote and sell you, as kids and as kids and as parents, basically who are now grandparents now, maybe even great grandparents, sell you on the fact that, hey, you need to get this cereal for your kid, even if it's for one time only. Like I told you with the G.I. Joe one, I know I ate that. I know I ate the Batman one. I don't know if I ate the Nintendo Cereal System one. That might have been one that I didn't get a chance. No, I think I may have, but it may have been when I was camping with my family and relatives at Comanche, Lake Comanche, that is. But the thing is, I probably ate that as well. I can't, like I said, I can't really recall. But G.I. Joe, Batman, I know I did. I think I even ate Hot Wheels and such. So I ate some of these. And again, it was mainly because of the fact that it was stuff that as a kid, I enjoyed. I enjoyed watching, not enjoyed watching, but reading the Sunday morning comics and everything when we get the Sunday morning paper. So that to me, having something like the morning funnies was always, something that I could look forward to. The only problem is with families like me that were on a budget, it was a once in a while, or if you do good in school and behave throughout the rest of the week, not get in trouble, that was the kind of reward that you were going to get. You were going to get a chance to have your cereal, the cereal you wanted, if you will, in your hands on that Saturday morning. So when your parents would go grocery shopping that Friday evening or Thursday evening, and you've proven, hey, I did everything you said, they'd get you that cereal. Or even if they already did grocery shopping, but they made you that promise, they'd get you that cereal. So to me, looking back in it, as a kid, I enjoyed, I enjoyed always watching the commercials and once in a while getting a chance to try these out. Now, the one thing about a lot of these cereal boxes, whether the empty or even unopened, because believe it or not, as Chris Boris has proven, there are cereal boxes that are unopened, from the 80s and the 90s that were distributed by Ralston based on a licensed IP that sell for high prices on places like eBay or other auction sites. Yeah, a lot of them sell for high prices. He said that the Nintendo Cereal System, an empty box, at the time he recorded and premiered that Nintendo Cereal Systems I Rate the 80s episode, at that time would go for $300. They probably go for a lot more now. Some do go less, and that's good, but some of them that are unopened still have the cereal in there. They actually will go for a lot more. And sometimes the prizes you would get in the cereals go for a heck of a lot more than the empty cereal, unopened cereal boxes, that they came in. And that's a fact. That is a fact. They go for a heck of a lot more. And heck, if you have one, maybe you should look it up online, see how much it goes for, and say, you know what? Maybe I can part with this to get some money in. I mean, I know people tell me I should part with some of my stuff, but yeah, there's an old saying of if you want to make up for lost time. I think myself and people in my generation that kind of collect, like me, you know, we're kind of making up for lost time if you get my drift, if you catch my drift. But overall, though, looking at the history of Ralston and the licensed cereals and everything, I don't think I don't think there ever will be another cereal company, whether it's Kellogg's, Post, General Mills, you name it. I don't think there'll ever be another cereal company or cereal-based division within a company that will ever have the impact Ralston did when it came to licensed IPs. I don't think they ever will. I think honestly, it'll. I mean, I think honestly, if another company comes around like Ralston, because Ralston's still around, and like I said, they could probably, under the right management, could make a comeback with the right management and money behind them to say, hey, we're back in the licensed cereal business. We're gonna, take back what was ours. I'm not saying that won't happen because someday it could, but when I look at the fact that, growing up as a kid in the 80s and up to where I am now, looking back on it as a near 45-year-old person, looking back on it with that fondness, it's like, again, there will never be another cereal company or another cereal based division within a company that had the impact Ralston did. I mean, yeah, nowadays you have a lot of companies, taking their place. Like I mentioned, Kellogg's, General Mills, Post, Quaker, Multi-Mill. They're all taking the place of, Ralston, and basically licensing out, or getting the license to distribute out cereals based on IPs. I mean, one cereal, hold on for a sec. Like I was saying, one cereal, or one example, I should say, of companies like Post and Kellogg's and General Mills and Quaker taking up the notch, or taking up the taking up the notch, basically stepping it up where Ralston can't do it right now for the time being, as I mentioned, until say maybe somebody with the right money and with the right management skills is able to help them. A good example of that is Post, and what they did. This is actually an empty box of the Mickey Mouse Club, but this was to promote Disney's 100 years of wonder. Yeah, so me and my mom got this box basically when they started bringing them out. They started to bring them out, so we got it at Walmart, and we basically said, let's keep the box because it's going to be a collector's item. And I can tell you right now that if basically Disney, I'm trying to find the right words to say that. Basically, if this was the 1980s, if we were in the 80s still, Ralston's name would be right here or right here. That's where Ralston's name would be. It'd be right in the middle or right here on the right, if you will, the left, depending on how you're watching this. It'd be right there as the ones distributing this cereal. They would have been the ones first and foremost before Post, Kellogg's, General Mills, or anybody else that would say, "Hey, Disney, we want to help you celebrate 100 years," and Disney would say, "Okay, how much we want for you to do it for us." And Ralston back in the 80s, they would have said, "Okay, here you go, boom. Now we're going to license this out for you." And again, they would have, if we were still in the 80s, it would have been Ralston, not Post, behind us. And that's a fact. That is a true fact. And I think anybody watching this that's ate this cereal can kind of agree with that. Like I said, anybody watching will agree with that without a shadow of a doubt. As I just the mic here for a second. But yeah, anybody knows that could be would have been the case had we still been in the 80s and Ralston was still on the top of the hill when it came to licensing out, distributing licensed out cereals of major IPs. Post wouldn't have been the ones, selling, distributing that. It would have been Ralston, and I think we all know that. The same, the same could be said, believe it or not, for something like My Little Pony. You know, let me see if I got a good example with me. Um, Hold on, let me see if I got a good example here, guys. Do 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 do. Hmm. No, I don't. Do I want to pull that out? Okay, move that for a second. Hold on, guys. Like I said, a good example is if Ralston was still at its height, like when it came to distributing, distributing licensed cereals like they were in the '80s. Something like, let's say, My Little Pony here. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that Ralston would have been behind getting them serialized more so than anybody else had. And believe it or not, they did have a cereal, and I think it was done by Kellogg's or General Mills, one of the two. But they did have a cereal for a while. They did have a cereal. Now, I'm not saying, now that I think about it, I'm not saying that Ralston hasn't tried, if not been successful in getting some licensed IPs, but it's not like it used to be. Again, back in the 80s, you would have things like Cracker Jack, you would have things like Hot Wheels Nerds, Morning Funnies, Donkey Kong, and the others that I showed you. You would have Ralston all over that, before anybody else. And even if they got opportunities recently, it's few and far in between. It's few and far in between, like it used to be before. But again, looking back on this, as a grown up, I look back on it with fondness. I look back on it, with the hope that someday a company very similar to Ralston, will come out, and say, all right, let's let's take the title of licensee away from the likes of Kellogg's, Post, Quaker, General Mills, and let's make it our own. And again, maybe Ralston will make that return. Maybe they'll get somebody behind them, management wise, with the right kind of money, and say, all right, let's take back, our crown. Let's get the licenses to all the Disney properties, all the all the other properties out there, IPs, and let's make them into serials and whatnot going forward, and let's not let anybody take away that crown again. That potentially could happen down the line. I'm not saying it won't, and I'm not saying it will, but there is a good chance, a good opportunity that we could be looking at that in the very near future. But again, if it's not them, it could be somebody else that you least expect that could come out of nowhere and take that crown, take away all these opportunities from the likes of Kellogg's, Post, Quaker, Quaker Mills, and General Mills. They could do that. They could do that, and I think a lot of people watching, if not listening, do agree that yeah, that opportunity probably someday down the line will present itself to somebody outside of those major for cereal distributors that we know of. But again, looking back on the history that Ralston's had, the impact that it's had, I can't say any more than what I have. Again, I just look back on it with fondness and hope someday we'll get, hope someday that the next generations in the future get to experience the magic that myself and others did from the 80s, 90s, and early to mid 2000s, if not the late 70s. But let me know what your memories are, guys. Let me know what cereals out of any that I showed you that you may have had the opportunity to eat more than once, in your home on Saturday mornings, if not before school. Let me know in the comments as well as in the live chat during the premiere, which, by the way, super chats will be open or have been open during the live chat as described in the description, and super thanks as well during the video and after the video as well, which would both be greatly appreciated. Also, check out my Teespring store and other affiliated stores I will connect you to for merchandise you can't find anywhere else or you can find at a more affordable price. But guys, give me your memories though on your run, if you will, with the Ralston cereals growing up, if you grew up with them, and do you think we'll ever see a comeback, like them again in the future? Do you think maybe they will, regain the crown that they once lost when it came to being the licensee of IP cereals in the future? Let me know. And until then, guys, I will talk to y'all later. God bless. Take care.